Welcome to the Model Rail Replacement Podcast, helping you get to your onward journey. A friendly service that helps you get from A to B, or probably nowhere at all.
Hello and welcome to the Model Rail Replacement Podcast, or as we like to call it, MERP. We are now into episode 15. That's right, 15 episodes of our podcast, and going along quite nicely. I think we're doing well. I'm your host, James, and with me is co-host and producer
Sam. Hello.
Hello, Sam. How are you?
I am good. I'm very hot. So if you can hear a fan in the background, it's because I tried turning it around to record, and unfortunately it didn't work. So there's a fan noise in the background. Unfortunately, the British summer will last for approximately this day and only this day, and then we'll go back to normal. So you will have Sam and fan in this episode, so do apologize.
I'm actually the same. I've got a fan in the background of mine as well, and but I can't hear your fan. And I assume you can't hear my fan. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I've checked the weather forecast. We've got about 2 more days of this, and then we're back to the standard British weather. So, have you been making good use of this weather?
Yes, to a certain degree. I've been out and about a lot with work. We have South Sea Seafront in Portsmouth, and we've been making good use of that. We've got loads of splash pads dotted around, so with a family, it's quite handy to go down to those and at least be in some sort of pool. I mean, South Sea waters are not considered good at the moment due to people dumping untreated sewage into the Solent. But other than that, I mean, we've got some great views down here in South Sea. Please come join us. How about you? Have you been making good use of the good weather?
Absolutely not. I've been in the garage for like a week working on the layout, getting it so it actually runs properly. So I think I said last week we had trains running, and we did. And then we got other trains out and we started testing. And the Cavalex 56s didn't like the elevated curves. They were coming off there. The Curacao 66s didn't like a set of points in the fiddle yard. Nothing like one of the curves on the scenic side, and then there was a set of points at the other end of the fiddle yard where again anything that wanted to come out of the fiddle yard would derail, and that's because the angle I had the points that was just way too sharp to allow anything to really get around it. So yeah, I've been working busy as a beaver, I suppose, just rectifying those problems because the end was it was almost there. I could almost taste it, and then it was taken away, snatched from us. So I've been back around the room, sorting it all out, and since then, everything has been coming out the box. Trains have been set up, locos have been running. There've been a lot of thorough testing to make sure that the main lines are working and there's no problems with them before I move on to the next part of the layout build. So yeah, I've not really been enjoying the sunshine at all, really. I've just been in the garage, but every now and again I walk outside, and by late afternoon it gets very hot in here, so I do have to. I think yesterday I had to give up. It was just a bit too warm to be in here, so it's not really the weather for this kind of hobby, is it?
No,
Unless you're an outdoor modeler, of course.
Yeah, if you have a garden railway, this is your time to shine. Clean that track up and get those outdoor trains running for sure. Which is kind of handy that we've not necessarily been doing full on hobby in the last. Well, you have. I don't know why I'm saying that. You've been doing full on hobby, but the good news is that because everyone's been out enjoying the sunshine, it seems that nobody has really got any new announcements that have caught our eye or anything like that. So our news section this week is going to be non-existent, I believe, James, unless you've got something that you want to throw into the mix.
Let me just check my emails because sometimes they like to surprise us. But considering we're doing this in the evening and everyone in these industries has usually gone home, hang on. Kerno Model Rail Centre has a special newsletter they sent to me at 1423. Farewell June 00 gauge bargains. So there you go. Kerno have got some bargains on there. I tell you what, they had some 9F bargains the other week. I don't know if you saw it. I've never seen so many 9Fs. So I was like, I can see why they're in the sale. It's I tell you what, there's some good bargains here. Get yourself over to Kerno, have a look at the bargains there. That's our news for this week. That's sent obviously a couple of days before this episode's released, and that's about as much news as we got, I think. Not much really going on. So before we came on to record, I think we were just talking about various YouTube channels and sort of reminiscing about ones that have disappeared and things like that. And so I'm not saying to you, had you ever seen Intercity 82? Was we were sort of talking about Sam's Trains, and Sam's Trains is he's a very I can't think of the phrase, that Marmite, isn't he?
Yes.
You either like him or you don't. I'm not a fan of his carpet layout, but he seems like a really nice guy. So I got no issues with him there. But I just can't watch them being run on the carpet. I just like
that's okay.
I know he likes fixing locos and that, so maybe that's why he does it. Just gives him an excuse to have a little fiddle around with things. But
See, I'm the other end of it. I find his channel quite charming, and I do enjoy it. And I find, especially when it comes to a review of a specific loco that I'm looking for, he's always one of the top ones up there that have done reviews of a lot of the locos I'm looking at. So I do find it quite interesting. It's funny that you mention Sam's Trains and that we've been talking about it, because I just want to remind our listeners, we said in our neurodivergent episode, if you're not going to be nice, just leave people alone. You don't need to be unnecessarily mean to people who you don't like. You can tell people you don't like the channel, but that's like where you should probably draw the line. I can't imagine anyone has a personal vendetta where they are currently fighting with Sam's Trains back and forwards. I don't get it. And I feel like, I mean, you might disagree with me, James. You don't necessarily watch his stuff, but if you were on the receiving end of some of the stuff he gets, would you be a bit upset?
I think it's uncalled for, isn't it? If he's not your cup of tea, just don't watch. That's what I do. I know my boy loves watching his channel, and he's got him subscribed on his own YouTube, and he enjoys it, and that's his choice, and I've got my choice, and that's the way it should be, really. But yeah, there's no need for name calling. I don't think it's not necessary. And Sam does do a lot of good for the hobby, I think. By the fact that he has such a large audience, he has a large engagement. He keeps people interested in the hobby. He keeps people entertained in the hobby. He might not be for you, but he is for other people, and that's only a good thing in the long run for all of us, isn't it?
And we talked about how some people might not understand why he's got such a big following and stuff like that, because he's I think last time I checked he had 145,000 subscribers, which is he's definitely on one of the top high end versions of what he does. And I think I believe he has this sort of charm that can appeal to other people. I know I can watch a Sam's Trains video in the presence of my daughter with no worry of things being said that I don't want her to repeat. I think it is very family friendly what he does. It's very chalk and cheese, and I think in terms of our friendship, it was the first channel that you and I had discussed off air, and I think it was the first channel that you and I talked about where you said, I don't really watch it, and then I was like, I quite like it. I think it's quite good. And he's one of those people. We've talked about Laserjet before, you and I know your son likes to watch it and
absolutely loves him. Yeah.
And it's that thing of you may not like it, but someone obviously does. And enough people clearly like it, because there's 100, both of those two people we've talked about, whether it's your thing or not, they have 100+ subscribers. So there's obviously something that those people do.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, my wife couldn't really give a toss about trains, to be honest, but she quite likes Laserjet's channel. She think, of all the stuff the kids watch, that's one of the ones she does approve for the children to watch on YouTube. I mean, some of the other stuff that they watch in regards to video games and Minecraft, I mean, I really can't see the appeal of some of that stuff. Even if I was a child, I don't see why you'd want to sit there watching those people shouting into a microphone, running around in a video game when you could play the video game yourself. But
what makes it really funny as well is people say getting angry about these, and this is why it comes back to if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything, because you're just adding fuel to that fire that we talked about in episode 3. God, that was episode 3. That was ages ago now. In the fact that you posting about said channel makes people then go and look at that channel, or you commenting the bad comments adds to the YouTube algorithm. YouTube doesn't care whether you downvote or leave a bad comment on someone's video. The more downvotes they get, and the downvotes will affect you. That's something key to sort of say. The downvotes will affect how many of the recommendations of that video you get. But the comments help the YouTube. So for each comment, oh, this is a pile of rubbish, that just adds to the algorithm. That's still an additional comment on that person's videos. That's still 15,000 comments that they've got on that video. Regardless of what the actual comment is, YouTube doesn't take that into consideration. It doesn't analyze every single comment. What it does analyze is how many comments that person's got. And all you're doing is you are feeding their fire. If you're taking the time to watch that person's video, you're feeding that fire. Like, if you don't like it, don't watch.
That's it. It's a very basic thing, isn't it? It's like, all he wants to know is, are you watching it? Are you commenting on it? You are. You obviously like it. Right then, I'll tell everybody else.
You suddenly get like named and shamed as like the number one Sam's Trains person of the year award, and you're like, no. It's funny, and I genuinely think. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's sometimes where I sit and I'll make a video and I'll go, I put a lot of work and a lot of effort into this video, and then I go, how have they got so many? And I'm not in this instance. I'm not talking about Sam's Trains, and I'm not going to mention it because that just adds fuel to it. For the same reason that when we talked about that neurodivergent episode, the person who was creating all of the fire that was causing the problem, we never mentioned who that was, because that just adds fuel to that fire and it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
But there are channels out there where you sit there and you go, how has this person got so many subscribers? And you sort of sit there and you judge your stuff and you go, that's when I feel I need to sit back and go, the second I'm trying to gauge myself against other people, I need to make a video for me to share what I've been up to, not for me to become famous.
Yeah. There are a couple of channels out there, and I think they are deliberately aggravating for the purpose of. I know there's one channel, and I'm not going to say what it is, and I'm certain that they deliberately do it to aggravate. And to me, it's like car crash. I know what they're up to, but I just want to watch them get up. So just, how do people get suckered into this? But I know I'm making it worse because I'm then adding a viewing figure to it. But that's the way it works sometimes. That's how you. There you go, folks. If you want your YouTube channel to grow, you've just Mr. Nice Guy doesn't win. Just be an arse. Just be nasty and toxic, and you'll be flying up there.
The Model Rail Replacement podcast does not endorse James's views on this subject. Please ignore everything that he has to say.
Basically, please be nice to everyone, and if you can't be nice to them, don't bother saying anything. Because the situation I saw made me really angry, but I realised that by me jumping on the bandwagon was not going to. And luckily, James talked me down off this theoretical ledge where I was about to be like, because it wouldn't help anyone. Yeah. And it's okay to have an opinion. Let's clarify that. But come on, let's just be nice to people or about people. And if you're going to do it, do it in a private chat.
Yeah, I mean, what we talked about and that thing, and to me, it was you didn't need to wade in because I think people were intelligent enough to read that and say, why would I want to watch that? You're not coming across as very pleasant to me. You know what I mean? So no thanks. But there we are. But yeah, what we've been talking about this week, and then we just got reminiscing about old YouTube channels that disappeared. So I say like Camelot Junction. I don't know if anyone out there ever remembers that one. I think it was around like 2011, 2012. It used to be a very popular channel, then that one just disappeared off the face of the earth. Say Intercity 82. I think he was the original Sam's Trains. I'm sure he was. He was in a conservatory, and he just have all sorts of engines just running around there. He had a skirting board with a little plaque on it saying the world's most famous skating board. And we've just gone and checked his channel out. It was like 4 years was the last video put out by that channel.
Yeah, 75,000 subscribers. But then if you look back, the biggest linking thing to a lot of these channels is the let's use quotation marks, the fame doesn't happen overnight. This person started posting, I mean, I'm going to go back to Sam's Trains. Sam's Trains has been posting for a very, very long time, a lot longer than a lot of us have. So please bear that in mind. This person has been working, whether you believe it's hard or not at all. This person has been working on their channel for 10 plus years now. So, and I believe that Intercity 82 is the same because I'm going back and I'm coming across videos that are 9 when my laptop loads up properly.
That is one of the oldest channels I remember. There was that one. I mean, Everard Junction is again. I think that is a very old channel. When you go digging into the videos and seeing how long, Richard's been working on his projects, and that's the kind of thing to remember. It's this instant gratification that people want these days. YouTube channels, especially in this niche little subject that we all like, that is probably like 0.1% of the population of the world are interested in, is so hard to grow. So, if you are out there, you are starting a YouTube channel, don't feel that you need to go into, dirty tactics. Just work hard, keep at it, and you will get discovered and you will grow. And your hard work will pay off. I think that's the best way to put it.
On a very different note, if somebody does want to give myself and James instant fame, we would also appreciate that.
Absolutely. If the producers of Model Rail Challenge want to do a season 3, I know they kind of died away, but we're absolutely forward for that one. If you want a new show about model railways, anything like that, we're forward for it. A Top Gear version of model railways or train related. That's well. Netflix, I have an idea for a TV show. It's based on basically all the ongoings I've ever seen at work. But if we sign up, I will have to leave. So it's got to be worth it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, going back to the YouTube things as well. And if you go back to some of Everard Junction's first videos, some of the quality on that is just absolutely bonkers as to how uninspiring in today's age. If you looked at it and you went, God, is that where the channel that you see, if you watch their last and their first video, you'd be completely blown away. I've also gone back to the beginning of Intercity 82, and the furthest you can go back is 14 years. So that person's channel has been around for 14 years to get to that level that they're at. So I just thought that was an interesting marker for it.
I think with New Junction, his is quite old as well. If you go back to the very start of Richard's channel, I don't know if they're still there. He actually started his channel with stop motion animation in Lego.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. James and I have got a very jam-packed episode for you today, but we're still doing this thing where we're reminiscing and talking about all these things. So I'd like to pretend I want to apologize, but I'm not going to, because sometimes these things do need to be said. Whilst I'm going back and just having a quick look at the New Junction stuff, James, do you want to tell everyone what's coming up in the main segment of today's episode?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, as we said, we are 15 episodes in, and you haven't worked out the format already. It tends to go discussion, battle, interview. So last week was... No, hang on. I got the wrong way order. Anyway, it's those three. Last week was the discussion. The week before was a battle. So this week is an interview. And it will be with Mitch's Models. This is an Australian modeler. And so the subject is Australian modelling. And I found it's absolutely fascinating because my knowledge of Australian railways turned out to be absolute rubbish. Even my son outshined me when he walked into the room and asked Mitch a few questions. I don't know if that made it to the interview. But yeah, his knowledge far surpassed mine. So talking to Mitch about Australian railways, I found such an interesting subject. He is a fountain of knowledge. And I think I really do hope people listening today, even though Australian modelling is probably not on your radar, this is going to be a great listen, just to up your railway knowledge in the very minimum. But, it's modelling. At the end of the day, your subject might be different, but we all tend to use different techniques and stuff that can be versatile and used across the different subjects. So hopefully people will enjoy this interview.
Yeah, I do want to add as well, Mitch is a fantastic weathering artist, and some of the work that he does is absolutely outstanding. And I'm not trying to spoil anything for you, but he does go into sort of modeling where you're modeling and how that can come into play as well. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. That was a really, really good point you brought up there. Definitely a valid one. So yeah, hopefully people enjoy that. Have we finished reminiscing about YouTube? Could be
I believe so. Not because we don't want to talk about it, but because otherwise this episode is going to be a 3 hour spectacular, which we need to steer away from.
Was the Lego video there?
No, no. So it looks like. Sorry, thank you for reminding me. So it looks like Richard has deleted all of those old style videos. The first one is 7 years ago, which was a Hornby HST Virgin East Coast mainline review. It looks like, and that was only 1 minute 54. So without clicking on it and the noise deafening everyone at home, it looks like it's a lot of like 1 minute, 2 minute running sessions and stuff like that. And it makes sense because the algorithm of what YouTube will be doing will mess with Richard's stuff. And I did the same. I deleted all of my old Warhammer stuff off Emperor's Path channel because what happened was one of my most viewed videos was sort of skewing the kind of traction I was getting. I had a weathering video where I taught people how to weather tank tracks really easily. And it was like my highest played video. And I was like, but this is bringing people to my channel. And then they're going to see I do trains and they're going to be like, nah. And then they're going to jump off that. So I did the same. I deleted all of them. But yeah, I mean, you go back in some of these channels and look at some of the old videos. It does look great.
Yeah, it's. I think sometimes nice to go back and just reminisce, have a little watch.
I still really enjoy going back and looking at Richard from Everard Junctions. Too many Richards. He built a really beautiful carriage shed, which was massive, and it was so that it could accommodate, I think, the 9 coach trains that he was running on his layout.
Yeah.
And he built this beautiful, beautiful thing, and it was a really good series that he did on it. And then not long after he did it, that's when he scrapped the.
He ripped it all up, didn't he?
Yeah, I want to know what happened to that because I think it would have it was so beautiful. If you go back, watch it. It's a really fantastic series. He does the whole starting from the beginning, how he does ballasting and weathering and building and scratch building and stuff like that in that particular series, and it's a bit more condensed than doing an entire layout, and I thought it was really interesting.
Anyway, yeah, as I say, we could get suckered into this and be talking all night about it. So we'll call that a close. No news for this week, obviously, apart from the bargains email I saw from Kerno. So go have a look over there if you're after a bargain. Otherwise, we're going to take a short break and come back with our interview with Mitch from Mitch's Models.
Look at that! You see that there? The super shiny diesel loco that's coming this way. Yeah, I see it. Isn't it beautiful? So fresh, so clean, like it's straight out of the box. I mean, yeah, it's nice, but I prefer it to have a used look to it. In an ideal world, that would be nice. But I'm sure the owner doesn't have the confidence, skill or time to undertake such a job. Then why don't they just send it to Emperor's Path? Emperor's Path? Yeah. SBJ has years of experience in model railways and wargaming, the ability to meet your weathering needs, and works with you during the whole process to ensure the project is how you want it, not like it's come through a factory. Come on, that must cost a fortune. Not really. He offers different levels of weathering at really affordable prices. I've got my whole fleet weathered by him. My loco's got the full treatment, whilst my rolling stock just a dusting with the airbrush, and it looks really authentic. I might just get a quote. How do I contact him? You get him on Instagram at emperors_path, by Facebook, Emperor's Path, or emperorspathcontact@gmail.com. Emperor's Path Weathering. If it's not filthy, let's change that.
And we are back, and today is another guest interview, and this is with Mitch from Mitch's Models. Hello, Mitch. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I'm getting over a bit of a flu, so if I start coughing halfway through a sentence or anything, forgive me. But apart from that, I'm doing really well.
So, Mitch, we always like our guests just to give us a little background and tell us about your modelling and what you're up to, what you're currently working on, etc. And for our listeners, I suppose you will be something slightly different because if they haven't guessed from the accent, you're an Australian modeler.
I come from a land down under. Yeah. and I'm a bit of an eclectic Australian modeler as well. Specifically, I model railways in Queensland, with Queensland Rail being my primary prototype, I suppose. But it does mean that I'm currently modeling all in HO scale, but three different gauges at once.
Blimey.
So it's a bit it's a bit more complex than the standard layout, I suppose.
Okay, yeah, because I've become aware that Australian railways have the two different, I suppose, what standard gauges, or what you got, that and narrow gauge as well, or something like that. Is
Yeah, so it really depended on like which state you lived in. When railways first developed in Australia, Australia wasn't a nation yet, so there were all separate colonies. The states and territories that we have today, they were all divvied up as colonies and all self-governed. And they all took separate recommendations from their own independent advisors or the British Commonwealth, of course, on what sort of railway to build. And financial circumstances also played a lot into that. A lot of the colonies were very, very poor back in the mid 1800s and couldn't afford heavy duty mainline railways, and gauge really it became a huge part of the question of how do we afford to build railways across such a huge expanse.
okay, that's really interesting, isn't it? It's I find it curious that after the British having their own problems with the Battle of Gauges in regards to Brunel's broad gauge and that, you would have thought lessons might have been learnt and they'd sort of advised to kind of stick to the same size. So yeah, that's kind of interesting background there. We may have to do more on Australian railways, I think, in the future. It's quite an interesting subject. Awesome stuff. So that's sort of your modelling background, which is really cool. And I'm gonna have to say I don't know a lot about Australian railways, so I think this could be quite an interesting conversation. But we always like to start off with the usual question of: are you a steam, diesel, or electric modeler?
For the most part, I'm a diesel modeler. I grew up a lot with electric traction. I live in Brisbane and our suburban network is all electrified. So electric trains as such were really commonplace. So whenever you saw a diesel engine, it was something that was a bit more exciting, I suppose. It was noisier and it was, I guess, had like different connotations of the sort of trains that the engines were pulling. But also the availability of rolling stock in Queensland models is it's a growing aspect of the hobby, I suppose. So to find electric locos in Queensland, I mean they're virtually non-existent in scale modeling. So diesels is usually the way to go to make it easy on yourself.
That's
I feel
cool.
I feel like that's a big echo to something that we already cover when we talk about British railways as well, is that a lot of the electric stuff, which is the stuff that we have generally everywhere, doesn't actually get as many ready to run forms as some of the easier, like the diesels and the steam locos and stuff like that. So it's interesting that even in your neck of the woods, you're still coming across that problem where the stuff that you have growing up is not really available in a ready to run form. And I guess that's once again harps back to what we talked about when we sat with Danny, was the thing that is the most out there isn't available in a ready to run form. And that seems weird.
It's completely contradictory to our situation as well. Queensland Railways built the largest electrified network in the Southern Hemisphere. So in terms of mileage, we have a huge electric network. It just isn't reflected in the models that are available.
That's that's strange, isn't it? It's kind of, you would have thought that would have been like the bigger market for people to want to model. Because when it comes to modeling, most of it is usually nostalgia, isn't it? It's that I've seen that either growing up or I see that today, and that's what I want to model kind of thing. And that's yeah, it's odd, isn't it? That it's not catered for. But is it because electric modeling is always that little bit more difficult, like with your addition of your overheads and that? Is that, and maybe that's what puts people off modeling that, or maybe manufacturers going for it? I don't know.
It's a bit of a strange thing with Queensland as well being a narrow gauge state, that a lot of people are turned off by the fact that it is narrow gauge. Most people that model Australian railways will pick a standard gauge prototype. So they'll model the railways of New South Wales or Victoria, South Australia, something like this. Even though Victoria and South Australia were predominantly broad gauge, the models that are available for those prototypes are standard gauge in model form. Whereas
Okay.
if you're modeling Queensland, you can actually get authentic narrow gauge stock.
Okay, so this is, I suppose, like what we have with our OO gauge in the sense that we have models scaled to OO size of 4 mm to the foot, but they're actually running on 3.5 mm track. So it's actually
Kind of a little bit more specifically, it's kind of a little bit more like how you have like 00, but then you have 009.
okay.
So for Queensland, we're 3'6" main line.
Yeah,
So we use 12 mil track, which is meter gauge. So it's off by 67 mm in real life, but scale that down and it's such a tiny amount that there's no difference really.
yeah,
So in terms of like track availability and stuff, because of the European market, like Pico making HOM track and this sort of thing, that's all 12 mil gauge, or other manufacturers like Tillig, or even using like TT scale track because it's also 12 mil. So there's options that are sort of readily available. Whereas for broad gauge and things for the southern states, there's nothing. You'd have to scratch build everything. So they tend to just stick with standard gauge.
okay. So it's like the ease of convenience there. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I think too what people are confident with. I think
yeah,
people think, oh, narrow gauge, it's not readily available. We won't worry with that effort. We'll just model something a bit more mainstream and a bit easier.
yeah. That's that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Really, it's I suppose, yeah, it's getting that confidence in that kind of modeling, isn't it? But I mean, when I look at your Instagram page, I take it there is a lot of confidence in that modeling because I mean, the stuff you do is absolutely superb. So,
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Oh, that means a lot to hear. I really appreciate that.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
no,
I guess like with my work, it's just an eye for detail. I love the unique trains that we have in Queensland, and I like to reflect how they look in the real world, or how
yeah,
they did look. I model mostly the 1990s, and it was quite a transitional time period for Queensland Railways. A lot of old stock still running around, but a lot of really modern and innovative stock coming in as well. So it was a good option to model a bit of the best of both worlds.
yeah, that's cool.
I,
Awesome
I,
stuff.
I do
Yeah, go
have
on.
to ask because I have to do this in every episode that we do an interview. If you had to pick, would it be diesel or electric as your favorite?
It would come down to specific loco classes. I think like overall, I'd have to pick diesel. Yeah, don't get me wrong, like there are some locos out there that I would consider to be favorite locos of mine that are electric or even steam. There are we had beautiful steam engines here as well. But I think if you did it like overall, like as an average, it'd probably have to be diesel.
Perfect. I've got my answer. That's all I need.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that answer, Mitch. So it's quite interesting you mentioned all these scales because I think this could be an interesting answer here. But what is your favorite scale to model in?
Yeah, so I suppose it's complicated. The easiest way to put it is that everything that I modeled, despite the gauge, is HO scale because the scale overall is the same. It's only the track width that's changing. My layout complicatedly, is that even a word? My layout comprises of three gauges to reflect a lot of different operations that occurred in Queensland. So Queensland Railways was the primary railway builder, and they built 10,000 kilometers of 3'6" track. So that's what I model mostly. There were private sugarcane mills that also built 2,000 kilometers of 2 foot gauge track. So I thought, okay, I want to include at least a tiny portion of 2 foot gauge track. And then also the railway lines that came up from the south, by about the mid 1930s, early 1930s, I might be wrong on that date, but the standard gauge came through from the south, from Sydney. So prior to then, it was a case of all change. The train came to the border. There was an island platform. Everybody got off the narrow gauge train and onto the standard gauge train to head further south. So there was a push after Australia was federated to try and link all of the capital cities with standard gauge so that there was a common gauge between all capitals. So I wanted to incorporate a break of gauge yard as well, where the standard gauge met the narrow gauge to transship goods. So that's my 3 gauges, but all within HO scale.
That's cool. That's I find this talk of all the different gauges really interesting. Sort of that rich history of how the railways came to Australia there.
Yeah, I hope it's not too confusing for the listeners of the podcast. It's not always easy to wrap your head around. And I tell you what, it's even harder to wrap your head around when you're trying to design a yard with dual gauge points and things like this. It does your head in, particularly with trying to wire them and having the correct polarities and things.
Yeah. No, I can imagine that is not an easy job. I struggle enough with just a standard gauge yard to be wired up. So
For the listeners at home, if you go on Mitch's Instagram, I don't think you necessarily show it as much, but some of the stuff that Mitch uses it's effectively what we would consider, let's say, a length of HO flex track or 00 gauge flex track, but it's got 2 of the gauges built into it. So there's in essence an additional rail in there so that you can have 2 of the different gauges running on effectively the same length of track, whereas we have 009 track and 00 track that run parallel to each other. Maybe we don't have it where their trains, or not as often, we don't have it where the trains are effectively running on the same piece of track, but the different sized locos can go on the track as normal. I think that's one of the most incredible things, viewing some of the stuff that you share on your Instagram page, Mitch.
It's prototypical as well. We have miles and miles and miles of railways in Australia where there are 3 rails on the track. We have what they call a common rail, and then you have a rail each on the opposite side, depending on what gauge the track is. We call this dual gauge, and it's very, very common in a lot of places here. The worst was there were a couple of places in South Australia where the 3 gauges came together. And the point work and a lot of the infrastructure to have 3 different gauges in the same point. So 3'6", 4'8.5", and 5'3", all within the same track on like the rails on the same sleepers and things like. And it's just chaotic. And some of the things like the turntables and stuff that they had in the yards that had to accommodate all 3 gauges on the same turntable, it's just insane. It's no wonder why a lot of these yards ended up closing. It would have been an absolute nightmare trying to ship goods and things.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I think it's one of the things where obviously we're dipping our toes into the Australian modelling that you do. One of my favourite things about what you do, Mitch, is the weathering that you do. And like James said, the attention to detail that you do is insane. And your knowledge that you provide to people when they're talking to you about Australian railways is really, really interesting because you are this font of knowledge. And I'm hoping to the people at home, what Mitch is explaining about all the different gauges and how they work and how they still are things that are in Australia makes it really, really interesting. But once again, I'm going to tell you, you do have to pick which one's your favourite, though.
You do. And the correct answer is Queensland.
Cool. Which, for those sitting at home, is effectively narrow gauge, correct?
3'6" for Queensland, yes.
Yeah.
It's funny, when they decided to try and link all of the capital cities, they opted for standard gauge, but the majority of track that had been laid in Australia up to that point was 3'6" track. And the official recommendations that came through from Britain before we federated as a nation were to build to colonial gauge, which was 3'6".
Excellent stuff. So we'll move on to our next question, which is, what is your favourite loco that you own? And this could be quite interesting because I'm sure you'll say something that I have no idea what you're talking about. So
Google at the ready.
Quite right, you are, I'm sure. I tried to find like relevant British examples that I could compare things with to give you guys a bit of an idea, but like I was just coming up blank. Like I thoroughly tried to research British locos to try and find things that were similar, and I just we're just too unique in terms of what we build. One of my favorite locos that I own, 1741D is its number. It's a small diesel loco. Everything here, we only had one class of diesel loco, well, one class of sort of mainline diesel loco, I suppose, that had uh two axle bogies. Everything else was three axle bogies. So like your Coco diesels, even the very smallest ones had Coco bogies, and they did this to try and distribute the weight of the loco across as many axles as they could because of how lightly laid some of the country branch lines and things were. So these little guys, 1741D is an example of the 1720 class. They were little 1,000 horsepower locos, and they were used for everything. So everything from the top passenger trains right the way through to mixed goods, branch line workings, suburban workings, livestock trains, everything. They did everything. And I just think they're freaking adorable. Like they're just the sweetest little engines. I have 7 in my collection, and 1741D is one of my favorites. I feel like I did a really good job weathering it, and it was also published in Australian Model Railway magazine. So I was really proud of that too. Um, Also in its class, another number that I have, 1754D. 1754 was the first Queensland Railways model that I actually ever got, and it was bought for me as an anniversary present from my beloved partner. So that one's really, really quite special to me as well.
Oh, that's really cool. So for those of you sat at home, I've now moved into offending Southern Hemisphere now, so apologies, all of you. I'm going to give a rough idea of what this looks like. So you have, imagine if a Class 20 had a child with an American loco. That's the best way I can describe this. So you have a rough idea of, it does have that small sort of cuteness that Mitch was talking about. That, yeah, it does look adorable. I think it looks really cool. And it does have that sort of American loco look to it, but it does also have that sort of single, it looks like on the pictures that I'm looking at, a single cab version at one end. Mitch might be able to correct me on that, and I'm just not looking at the picture properly. But if
So like initially they were built almost like a small version of a Class 20, in that you had a really long hood and then a cab at the end. But crew preference was to drive them with the short end leading, much like the Class 20s as well. And then by the sort of late 80s, early 90s, they fitted air conditioning units to the short end of them, which gave them a tiny little nose, which is it just makes them look freaking adorable as well. But I guess like a small Class 20 would probably be a good way of putting it.
Yeah. I think I'm looking at the same images as well. When it's either a Class 20 or a 58 with only one cab, or a 70 with only one cab. It's sort of in that ballpark, I'd say, for the British modeler to try and imagine what this looks like. But the best way to look is just have a Google of it and look at these images yourself, because I can see why that is your favorite loco. It's there is a bit of
there was a big fleet of them, so they built 55 of them. I mean, it doesn't sound like a big number, but 55 that were spread out right across the state, so you didn't have to go far to come across a depot that had allocations of them. And given that they were employed on all sorts of traffic types, you saw them all the time, sort of thing. They were just everywhere. But yeah, if you Google QR or Queensland Railways 1720 class.
Stuff. Cool. We'll move on to our next question then, if you're happy to, and asking you, what is your favorite loco that you don't own?
We had these big electric locos. Now I'm saying electric, even though I said before I like diesels better. This is one example of an electric loco that I absolutely love. They were really quite beefy locos. So about 3,500 horsepower per loco. So they were very, very powerful as well. And they had a strange wheel configuration. They were bows. So they had 3 bogies with like your traditional bogey at each end, and then one sort of in the middle, very, very sort of Japanese style. But these locos were a development of other electric locos in the state. Queensland Railways were a huge mover of coal, and when the coalfield railways were modernised, they were electrified as part of the larger electrification scheme. And the coal trains became electrically hauled and 100 hoppers in length and absolutely massive, really. From mine to port and back to mine and back to port, and they just did circuits. And the development of these electric locos that hauled them led to the railway to say, we would like a similar loco that could also do general freight and passenger workings.
I'm going to do that thing of I've Googled it and explained to people what it is. So it does. It sort of looks like a subway train, a subway train or a metro train has had a lot of this is going to be the amalgamation of UK versus UK with American trains. So apologies. It looks like a Class 66 has had a child with an American subway train. James, if you've got it up on your screen, you'll be able to confirm if I'm right on that one.
Yeah, I can kind of see what you're saying.
Despite the lack of the windows on the side, I suppose you're right. And they were corrugated as well.
Yeah, I think that's why I've gone down
Yeah.
the 66 sort of corridor, like the sides of the 66. Or it looks like a Class 66 and Bumblebee from Transformers have merged together.
That's what I'm seeing. I'm looking at one of them, the other face. I'm going, it kind of looks like a film character, and I'm trying to think. I was thinking of the, the spy in Mos Eisley in the original Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I was kind of thinking, looks a bit like that in the sort of the face.
They do look cool though. I do really like them. We're
They are
doing
really
this,
cool.
We're doing this whole. We're trying to say what we think it looks like so that people can understand it, and hopefully we'll play this game where people say yes, you were right, or no, you were wrong, and we'll see how many people we've offended. The good news is I'm clearly not just offending Steam people today.
You just come for the world today, haven't you?
Everyone's sobbing.
You've thrown American trains in there. You're obviously having a go at Australian. You've had a good go at British as usual. Anywhere really, you sort of having a good dig at today. So you've done quite well.
I don't like to isolate communities. I like to make sure that everyone feels like they're being attacked at the same time.
Cool. So thank you very much for those answers. It's definitely enlightened me into traction on Australian railways. I do feel very educated today in these questions, so I appreciate that, and I'm sure our audience will too. So, as I said earlier, people come to have a look at your Instagram page. You'll see all the wonderful work that you do. I mean, your weathering is absolutely superb. A particular favourite of mine is the Baldwin that you've done, and everyone listening should know what that is because obviously that's the Bachmann narrow gauge model.
The little 1012D.
That's the one.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. Not a lot. There are a few of those that were exported after the war years to Queensland for the sugarcane mills, being little 2-foot gauge railways. They were quite receptive of such little engines.
Oh, really? Oh, wow! They've travelled the world themselves. Yeah, that's you're educating us even further. I'm just learning more and more. But yeah, to get to the next question, I suppose what I was going to say is, what is your favourite project that you have worked on?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's been obviously I'm known for my weathering, and there's been lots of things that I've weathered that I'm really, really proud of. I get a lot out of building kits and such as well, rather than just like weathering ready to run models and things. I embarked on quite a large project a little while ago to build a railway bridge. Now this bridge is 4 feet long, and because of the style of bridge building in Queensland, it encompassed a lot of different aspects of bridges. There were timber trestle approaches, and there's a main steel truss span on concrete pillars in the center of the bridge. So I had to find a number of different kits and bits and bobs that could be sort of kit bashed all together, I suppose, to get something that was representative of what I was trying to what I was trying to do. Um, it's ended up being 4 feet long, and it's something that I'm very proud of as well. And just the little individual detailing parts. That's what I really enjoy. I get into a bit of a headspace with it, and it's almost therapeutic just stuffing around with the little details. I've been making palettes recently, or rather painting 3D palettes that I bought, and I've got like over 60 palettes. I just keep painting palettes, and it's just really satisfying, you know. I like doing a lot of those little things. I made a model of a fruit co-op as well a little while ago, and it was really lovely to position like oranges with tweezers and just things like this to just make it look all perfect. So yeah, I guess you could say I just really enjoy stuffing around.
Awesome stuff. But yeah, a 4 foot bridge, that sounds like quite the adventure to work on. How big was your bridge in the end, Sam, that you were working on?
Well,
That's-
I feel inadequate now because my bridge is only 3 foot long, and I'm starting to feel a little
yeah,
bit like I need to make mine bigger.
Mitch is bigger
I
than
feel
yours.
this this is unhealthy competition that you know that I've all won, so we should probably just leave it at that.
I think that's good advice. We'll move on to the next question. Excellent. What is your next hobby purchase? Is that what we'd like to ask?
I'm a bit stuck with this question as well because depending on the release dates of some locos, it could either be a loco or it could just be some paints and general supplies. I really like Vallejo's paints.
Yeah.
The hobby shop not far from me sells the whole range of them, and I just find like so I actually don't own an airbrush. I have never airbrushed anything in my life.
Really?
Um, yeah, honest, I have never touched an airbrush. So everything that I do is hand painted, and I find that the quality of the Vallejo paints, even with a brush application, they flow
Yeah.
really nicely, and I get really good effects with them. So I would like to build up a bit of an arsenal of different colors with them. If the locos are released, then I got another one that you can Google. Queensland Railway's 1460 classes. I have some on pre-order, but as almost like a variation within the class, a couple of them were built with dynamic brakes, and this was among the first class of loco in Queensland to receive dynamic braking capabilities. And the front hood, so they had a really high nose. The
Yeah.
front nose, I suppose, was where the dynamic brakes were fitted, and they were almost like diagonally flared vents on the sides of the front of the nose. They earned the nickname elephant ears because of these vents. And in my pre-order, I didn't pre-order an elephant ear variant, and I think I would really like one. So I'll wait and see. The DC models have been released, but I'm waiting on the DCC sound ones before if I do decide that I want to get one as a next purchase, I'll wait for the DCC sound.
Okay. Yeah, I have indeed Googled it, and I just searched through, but I have found one with the vents on the side. I can see the elephant ears comment. But yeah, they're quite smart. It's I've been learning a little bit about dynamic brakes when I've been having a go on the old train simulator game, and you have the American locos because they sort of teach you about dynamic braking there, so it's slightly different to what we have over here. So, but yeah,
Do you
that's a
guys
smart.
not have a lot of dynamic braking in Britain?
Um, I wouldn't be 100% sure on how to answer that question. Someone saying I'm wrong. So I'll just say I've just been learning about it on the American locos on the game. Nothing was mentioned
You'll
on
have to get like
66
another.
tutorial.
It'll have to become like a question in your future podcast, so you can be like, and do you know what dynamic brakes are? And just gauge interest and understanding from anybody that can answer that question.
That's it. That's it. I suppose the best person to ask that, and I don't know if we're ever going to get him on, but Underground Eric, because obviously he works for GBRF as a freight driver, and so he maybe
Mm.
would be able to give us the answer. Yeah, well, I could Google it, I suppose, but where's the fun in that?
And any UK train drivers who listen to the podcast, because there are a couple of people who do listen to it, but they don't necessarily tell me what it's like driving on the railway. Send me a message and let me know, do we have dynamic braking? Now for the comparison, so for those of you who are currently driving and can't Google this, I'm going to say that this looks like, and hopefully this is the most spot on comparison I can do, that the 1460 class looks like the North British Locomotive Company 10800, which was a very short-lived diesel locomotive, which was, the difference is this is a Coco bogie diesel, the Australian one, whereas the BR version of it was a Bobo axled loco. That's the closest I can find to it. The only difference I'd say is that the Queensland one looks a lot more modern, but in terms of shape, it's got that sort of almost a teddy bear shunter mixed with a Class 20 mixed with the 10800. So yeah, James, how do you feel about that comparison?
Yeah, I think you're pretty much there with that description.
Just having a look at this 10800 thing, this thing, the 1460s were also 20 tons heavier. So they were a much bigger loco and they were a bit more powerful as well.
Mm. Yeah,
I think the standard for anything built outside of Britain, isn't it? We're essentially narrow gauge compared to the rest of the world.
It is a really beautiful looking loco, and it does, once again, it has that aspect where it feels like it's a hybrid of different countries' locomotives. Like the Australians have looked at it and gone, I like that about the British one, I like that about the American one, let's merge them together. That's the feeling I get whenever I look at Australian locos.
Other stuff. But going back to your other comment about the paints, I find it interesting that you say you don't use an airbrush, and it's the same when we talk to Danny. Danny also doesn't use an airbrush, and the results that both you and Danny can get with just a paintbrush, I think, goes to show anyone out there that doesn't feel confident with airbrush, or for whatever reason they don't want to own one or use one. I mean, like in Danny's example, he's in a flat. I think it's great that you can demonstrate how good of a weathering you can give something with just a paintbrush. So did that take a long time to get that skill, or did you have to have a few practices on stuff to get where you are today? I mean, yeah, how did you get there?
I mean, I was just born being able to do it. It's just a natural part of being Australian. No, just kidding. There was a lot of trial and error with it, and I think a lot of it was determination and almost competitiveness. This notion that everybody was telling me, if you want to weather something, you have to use an airbrush, and it was just it was almost like, well, why do I have to follow those rules? Like, surely there's another way to do things. And yeah, I guess as well, it does come down to your own personal circumstances. I also didn't have an area where it felt appropriate to be using an airbrush and setting up a compressor and all this sort of stuff at the time. So I experimented with a few different techniques. I did try just straight up acrylic paints. I've tried watercolor paints. I've tried like colored lead pencils.
Okay.
I also tried like different colored chalks, and that was what sort of yielded the best results. So from that, I moved into more professional sort of styles of powders. So I primarily use pan pastels. I find them really easy to work with, and you can get a lot of really good results. But
Yeah.
then I also do oil washes, acrylic washes, and even just straight up painting with acrylic paints and a brush. It all just depends on what sort of effect I'm trying to get.
Cool. So it's essentially it is that practice, isn't it? And finding out what medium works for you and how best to work with it, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think something that nobody ever talks about as well is that your prototype is going to benefit being weathered by different media based on the prototype that it is. If you look at a comparison between, for example, my weathering and Sam's weathering, is that Sam uses a lot of quite dark colors in oil washes, And it sort of gives an appearance of like lots of like gunk and gunge and grime that builds up around, like particularly on his EMUs and things. Whereas in Queensland, things didn't weather like that because we had a much drier climate. So a lot of my weathering needed to be more things like sun fading and rust chipping, and it meant that I needed to develop different styles of weathering to suit the prototype I was modeling. I don't think there's ever really a blanket rule for how to weather something, and that trial and error is also going to be in part due to what you are trying to model.
Yeah, no, do you know what? I never really considered that. Yeah, the environment of having its effects on the weathering and how it would weather. And yeah, when you put it like that way, because obviously as a British model, you just tend to think of the British Isles itself. But when you expand your comparison like you have there, from opposite ends of the world, yeah, I can definitely see what you mean. That's something to consider. Is how the environment affects it, and so how would it look because of that? And yeah,
It's been an interesting journey with that too, because the expanse of railways across the state of Queensland has been so huge. And you could have, for example, a louvered van or something that's crossed the entire state. It could have passed through savanna country, rainforest, the tropics, right through to a much drier climates in central Queensland, and then into subtropical Brisbane or something. The amount of biomes, I suppose, that this poor wagon's travelled through, and it's been belted by the harshest sun, and it's 45 degrees, and then like torrential rains in the tropics. Or there's so much variety that impacts that individual wagon. It does mean that depending on what I'm trying to copy, there is a huge variation in how stuff weathered here as well.
I love that. I really like that idea. That's yeah, that wagon and where it's been, where it could have been, and I suppose you can build up a train of different weathering styles of wagons dependent on their origins and their destinations, and sort of have
Exactly.
that.
Some of the colors weathered really strangely as well. From 1969 onwards, all freight wagons were painted in what Queensland Rail just called freight grey, and it was just quite a plain light grey color. In
Yeah.
some cases, it managed to weather into like a beige color. So they were really strange. It must have just been to do with the quality of the paint, or I really don't know. But that, like, a lot of louvered vans weathered from that grey color to a beige color. A lot of the guards vans that were painted freight grey became almost white or beige. There were a lot of different ways that things weathered, even just depending on the type of rolling stock that it was.
Yeah, I would never have thought it would have gone beige, or I suppose, but yeah, that's
Yeah, a bit of an oddity, but that's what
it's-
happened. So I try and copy that best
yeah,
I can anyway.
that's awesome. That's yeah, no, that's I feel it's temptation to model Australian railways now, just so I can just have a go at that sort of weathering, but I shall
Now
resist.
that's
Shall
your
resist.
first, your first your first mistake there, James, to say Australian railways. Hopefully, at the end of the podcast, you'll learn that that's too broad a topic. You'll have to be more specific with which part of Australian railways.
Quit Queensland, right?
Yep, correct. Correct.
You're right. I did learn. Awesome stuff. Cool. So yeah, we've sort of said what that's actually your next purchase, and maybe we've already covered that next question. What is your favorite part of the hobby?
Oh, I love losing myself in it. I really enjoy this almost like hyper focus of just getting in on it, in on that moment where it's therapeutic, and you're sort of building this own little world, and you escape within your own headspace with it all. Time just flies, and you just sort of sit there enjoying it. Do you know what I mean? It's got to be a type of therapy for sure.
Definitely. No, I'm behind you there 100%. I will just get lost into the hobby if I decide I want to do something. Yeah, exactly the same. It's yeah, you get so involved with it, it just sort of the world disappears around you. But
I find too, it doesn't even specifically matter what your project is. If you're in the mood to do something, you can just sit down and just find something to fiddle with. And hours just fly by, and you just, whether it's, a spot of weathering or a little bit of scenery or whatever, you even just like tinkering with rolling stock or cleaning wheels or something, if you feel like doing it, you feel so good when you do engage with it and you do sort of get into that headspace.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think people listening will probably nod their heads and agree with that as well. I think that is one of the most major appeals of this hobby is just going down that rabbit hole and getting lost in a world of enjoyment of just doing these little projects, like you say. And it doesn't matter what it is. You could be trying to fix a loco or weather something or build a kit. As soon as you sort of focused into it, and then gives you that pleasure. I think that's why we're all in this hobby, really, isn't it?
It's imagination. Like we've all got to be imaginative to be in this hobby, and I think that's where your mind goes. You're imagining that loco or that train running, or you're imagining the noise of the wheels on the track, or you're imagining what the train would look like passing over this bridge or through this tunnel, or that's sort of what keeps you going in it, isn't it? It's you get lost in making that little world.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's. I think you've answered that perfectly there. To be honest, I really like that. I'll
Thanks, I'll
move.
be here all night.
That's what I'm concerned about. For us, it's only the afternoon. Yeah, yeah, I think you've answered that perfectly. I'll move on to our next question then. Is if you were to create a new layout, what is the one thing you think you need on it?
Oh man, I think this is really underrated. I've got all my bench work at the moment. That's as far as I've gotten on this layout, and the bench work was sort of more installed given the space that I have. The actual designing of the track plan, I have a general idea, but the specifics of it is still unfolding. I think in this stage where I'm looking at track design, one of the biggest things that I think any layout should need or consider if you have the space is a triangle or a Y. I don't know what you guys in Britain, do you call it a triangle or a Y?
We'd probably call it a triangle. I think most people would.
Yep. Okay. Or a balloon loop. So we have a lot of rolling stock here that was designed to run in a specific direction. And it meant that turning entire consists rather than individual coaches or wagons was commonplace. And I'm talking about things like if you had long distance trains, and remember in Queensland, like we had a train here called the Sunlander, for example. It traveled 1,700 kilometers from Brisbane to Cairns and took like 32 hours or something to get there. So they're really quite long distance journeys where factors like sitting backwards or having a dining car around the wrong way or things like this weren't practical for journeys of that length. So turning of individual coaches didn't really occur. The consists remained together and the whole train was turned at the end of the line rather than running a loco around and everybody having to sit backwards or whatever. And I think including that sort of stuff in a layout, not only does it make it easy for the operator, but it's also really quite prototypical for the railway that I'm modeling, be it either a triangle or a balloon loop.
Okay.
I think the
Yeah,
best thing to like confirm that too, that something that we have is if you ever take the Eurotunnel, not the Eurostar, to France from
Oh,
Dover
the
to
Le
Calais.
Shuttle?
Yes, that's it, the Le Shuttle.
Yes,
That
I read on it when I was 15.
Yeah, well, that's got the same thing where it rather than just going backwards and forwards, when you arrive at the country that you're traveling to, whether it's going into the UK or going into France, it does go up in a big balloon loop and always travels the same direction.
Yes.
And I think that's the closest thing we have to it here. But I had never heard of it happening anywhere else in the world. I mean, it certainly doesn't happen anywhere that I know of in the UK, but then my knowledge is small on it. But I know it
Yeah.
happens there. And I think that's the closest I can. Anyone who's traveled on Le Shuttle will know that when you get into France, you think, oh, there's the station. And then next thing you know, you're going up and doing this massive loop before you come round. And then you disembark, you drive off the wagon/coach and go on your merry way. But yeah, I think that's really, really interesting that that's something that happens elsewhere in the world and on a much greater scale.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of it is operational requirements, and here when like the Sunlander at times was 24 coaches long, and some of the platforms in the smaller towns that it called at might only be 3 coaches in length. So for the operational requirements of everything to be facing a certain way and in a specific order, was huge in terms of loading baggage and yeah, even just the PA announcements on board to say, "Oh, please disembark through cars E and F or whatever." Um, so it became much more imperative here to keep everything in specific order and keep it all turned at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Sam was saying that I mean, probably because we were very limited on space in such a tiny little island that we are as well. But yeah, I think the Euro tunnel is probably one of the few where we have a turning loop. Otherwise, it's just where lines have coincidentally sort of joined together. I think it's like I can think of a triangle in Yorkshire where there was one before HS2 was starting to build the Paddington main lines. You could take the High Wycombe route and then turn around at Greenford and come back on yourself. But again, as I say, they were routes that gradually got put in. It's just a coincidence that you can just manage to turn your train around on these things. But yeah, nothing ever built on purpose to do that. So
Lots of places here had purpose-built triangles as well for turning locos and things rather than turntables. There were some divisions in Queensland that operated Bayer Garrett locos. And if you've seen Bayer Garrett's,
yeah,
the big articulated with sort of 2 tenders, and these were 482 284s, so they were quite large locos. Where turning them on a turntable would require such an investment in specific infrastructure that it was just way easier to turn them on a triangle.
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because yeah, I didn't need to Google that one, and I knew exactly what you're talking about there.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
But yeah, big engines. But yeah, I agree. I think a balloon loop is something that's great for your model railway if you have the space for it, because like you say, it allows you just to turn that train around. I like the idea, and so I said it on when we did my interview of the operational side of things, and I like that your layout should represent a part of the world, and trains go one way, and then they come back from that direction.
Mm.
So by having that balloon loop in there, that gives you that added advantage that all you're doing is just turning the train round so that it does come back from where it went to. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what happened here. I that's why I think balloon loops are a good idea. We also had coal wagons here as well. So they had knuckle couplers. Everything here was upgraded from screw links to knuckle couplers, and these they were actually a gondola rather than a hopper. And to empty them, the whole wagon was flipped upside down. And like these were big wagons, like big bogey wagons, and the knuckle coupler was designed to rotate so that when they flipped the wagon upside down, they didn't actually have to uncouple the train to do it. But it also meant that every hopper had to be, well, every gondola had to be oriented a certain direction, because if it wasn't, you'd end up with a rigid knuckle up against another rigid knuckle rather than a rigid with a swivel, and the whole train would just like tip itself over, like it wouldn't engage properly. So in that sort of instance, everything had to be really specific in how it was shunted into that rake of wagons.
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, that'd be quite embarrassing, wouldn't it? If they haven't got anything that can swivel, just try to tip a wagon over and everything goes with it. Anyway. We'll move on to the next question, which is, what is the one hobby item you'd encourage everyone to buy?
Hands down, a loco from Queensland.
It's no, I don't need any encouragement to start modelling continental railways. It's very easy for me to go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I like that idea. And then the next thing you'd start buying an Australian loco, then some wagons, and the next yeah, I've done it before. I've done it with German railways. I've done it with American railways. I'm very easily swayed. So
Excellent. Excellent. The trouble is, if you're going to do it properly, you're going to have to buy all the 12 mil track now as well.
yeah,
Okay.
I can get. Did you say TT works for that? Because I've got a whole box. I got a bit carried away when I went with the
You know what?
TT
It
project.
does.
I have a
Yeah.
TT project.
Yeah.
all the time.
TT is the same gauge.
Oh, excellent stuff. I can use that then.
We were all very excited when Hornby made some announcements for TT because we were like, oh great, we can rob the mechs to make things. So I
Excellent.
guess a more realistic answer to your question. I would think either a good set of brushes or an excellent pair of tweezers
Definitely good tweezers. Yeah, no, I'm with you that.
and a loco from Queensland.
Yeah, I've walked in that trap before. Like when I first started in the hobby, I need some tweezers, and I bought some tweezers that I don't even think the tips even met each other when you pushed it together. They were absolutely useless. And yeah, I quickly learned.
This same thing happened to me recently. It was this beautiful set that came in like a proper case and everything that all velcroed up, all really nice. And I don't think any of the tweezers actually hold anything. I would think, with obviously with the dollar to pound equivalent, or exchange rate rather, I would think it was probably upwards of £20 that I paid for this set. And none of the tweezers don't even meet up.
Oh, bloody hell. That's rubbish. Yeah. Yeah, I went through a few, I think, until I actually started getting some decent sets of tweezers. But I always get mine from Squires now whenever I see them at a model show because they're like a supplier of all the little bits and bobs that you need for your models, like your tools and your switches and that. And they've always got really good tweezers there, so I always buy mine from them now. But yeah, you need a decent pair because sometimes there's such
Oh,
tiny
okay.
little screws or jobs you're working on, especially handrails. And you've got these useless things that can't hold anything. You just sort
Yeah,
of pull your hair out, aren't you? Yeah, and
yeah. I find
paintbrush.
also buffers and air hoses.
Yes, anything that's susceptible to just pinging out
That's
if they're not
always
held
really
tight
always
enough.
really fiddly work.
So yeah, I think that's a
Mm,
great answer. And also with the paintbrush
yep.
as well. Decent paintbrush is definitely a must for any modeler.
Yeah, well, like I mean, I've done it before as well, where I bought really expensive brushes and they've been really quite ordinary as well. You go and dip them in the paint and all the bristles fall out or something like this.
Yeah.
So I think like it doesn't have to be the most expensive to be the best.
No.
But also try not to go for the cheapest either. I'm sure there's a happy medium with these things.
So yeah, that's your recommendation then of the tweezers and the paintbrushes and the Queensland loco, obviously. So I'll move on to the next question. I think it'll be quite interesting because I watch I think it's Will James on YouTube. He tends to review the Australian model shows. Do you go to a lot of the exhibitions? I mean, I'm sort of talking. I'm still thinking in the mindset that you live in a very small place like we do, where you can just nip down the road to the model show. But obviously, forgetting it's quite a larger area you live in. So, do you get to a lot
Yeah,
to
look,
model?
I mean, we don't have as many shows as obviously like what Britain or America would have.
Yeah,
But we do still have, I guess, like primary shows every year. So we just had the Brisbane Model Railway show, which was about a month ago now. And it was a pretty good turnout. So it was over a weekend, the Saturday, Sunday. Um, the I suppose like the exhibiting layouts, they can be a little bit samey, but I mean that's not a reflection on the modelers or the quality themselves. I think it's just that we don't have a large community like what a lot of other countries would have, or even like some of the southern states. Sydney and Melbourne get really quite big shows as well, but little old Brisbane, it's a bit quieter up here. In saying that, the shows that we get here are really good opportunities for shopping, because a lot of the retailers from down south and stuff, they have stalls here, and you end up spending a lot of money. Hobby shops aren't as common in Australia as they are in Britain either. They're a lot more widespread in Britain. Here, there's only sort of a select few, and only in bigger centres, really. And even then, you can't always get what you want. So the advent of online shopping and that sort of thing is really big. So when they actually come to the shows and things, and you can see the products, in your hand when you buy them, there's a real novelty with that as well. There are a couple of good shows that we do get though. The Brisbane show, obviously. We also have the Pine Rivers show, which is hosted by the Model Railway Club that I'm a member of, and it's not too bad. They're all really quite small, but they're still enjoyable, and entry's only a few dollars, and it's good to walk around for a couple of hours, sort of thing. Um, there was a model railway show that used to be hosted. It might still be hosted in the old railway workshops, which are now a museum as well, out in Ipswich, I suppose it's about 40 kilometres or so from Brisbane itself. But one year, they even brought in a steam loco, like full size, and set up all of the stalls and stuff around the loco. So that was really cool. It was a bit of a 2-for-1 then.
Yeah, that does sound very cool. That's um. So, sort of, you're saying about the shows and that, and I'm wondering, is model race a big popular sort of hobby over in Australia? Because I particularly remember an episode of Neighbours in which one of the characters had got their model railway out on the street, and all the other characters are getting really excited about it. And I thought, this is really weird because in soaps in our country, that person would be ridiculed and bullied right now for getting their model railway out. Is it like that in there, or have I just been lied to by television?
I think it's probably unfortunately common that people all over the world would be ridiculed for their interest in railways. But I think as well, like I found when I was young, like as a kid or in my teens, it really made you weird. Like, you'd be in school or whatever, and everybody else, oh, Mitch, he likes trains. Ooh. Um, but now, like, I'm 31 now, and when I tell people, they do find it really interesting. I guess people mature over the course of their lives, and having hobbies and interests and something that isn't just staring at your phone for days on end, like what a lot of younger generations are nowadays as well. I think it's helping to sort of boost a bit of a revival in the hobby.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there. As I say, I noticed a lot with the model shows. I know we completely gone tangent off the. I'm not even asked the question, but there is definitely like my children's generation, which I think are Generation Alpha or what they call them now. There's a lot more interest from them in the hobby, and I think the only downside and unfortunate thing about that is nowadays the price of getting into that hobby. Because, like you say,
Yeah,
generation before that have very much been bought into that digital world and are on their phones and enjoy that, and that's their thing. And but I think like my kids' generation, they see the phones, but they're just everyday objects. They're just like what a car was to us when we were born and grown up. It was just a car. But I'm pretty sure to my parents, car's
yeah.
quite a thing. Um, and I suppose it sort of progresses like that. And yeah, I definitely. Well, I hope that the younger generation are going to get into these sort of hobbies because they are great, and I think they are interesting, and it does help you to get away from your phone. So yeah, but it is nice to know
It's
that
the
people.
novelty of something sort of physical and hands-on too. Like it's being able to craft. I think that's a lot of where like the resurgence has come from, because it's not that you've typed something or you've drawn something on an iPad or whatever. It's that you've made this with your hands.
Yeah, that's definitely it, isn't it? Yeah, it's that showing that skill of what you can physically do, isn't it? Rather than, like you say, getting a computer to do it. because anyone can get the computer to do it. So, of all of those exhibitions, then, and we'll get back to the questions, which one would you say was your favourite? And in particular, is there a layout that you really enjoy? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be at a show. We always, say there might be something on YouTube you've seen, or you may have visited, I don't know, a museum or somewhere like that. Yeah, what is your favorite exhibition and your favorite layout?
I think I'll be biased in saying that the Brisbane exhibition is my favorite. There's a few that I really like. There's a layout called Stanham Vale, and it's basically a narrow gauge Queensland Railways layout set in the 1960s. But the attention to detail and the variation in industry, whilst also depicting like a busy country town. I think it's a very, very well done layout. It's very aesthetically pleasing, but there's enough operation in it to keep it really interesting as well. And given that it's a show layout too, it's all designed to be portable. So I think that's always a major like a major factor in these decisions. Like, well done for them to be able to make it portable.
I can definitely see the appeal of that, and such interesting wagons. There's so many different ideas that sometimes aren't explored, and I think one of the biggest boundaries is usually the language barrier, because I think European modelling, they have some very interesting ideas that sometimes I can't find because Google's just looking for stuff in English for me. Thank you very much for those recommendations. It's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. I'm afraid we've only had one question left, which is our usual, which has obviously been expanded from what it once was. So we say, what's your favorite resource? So it used to be just between YouTube and Instagram, but nowadays, it could be anything from a person to a book. Maybe you've got something that will surprise us. What is your favorite resource?
Do you know it's funny, because I'd listed in my notes both YouTube and Instagram, but also Australian Model Railway magazine. And I say the Australian version specifically because for product releases and hints and tips on modeling Australian scenery, it's very, very difficult to learn how to model that in that style if you've only got British, European, and American publications. So hats off to Australian Model Railway magazine. The other resource that is extremely important is friends. And I've made a lot of friends in this community, particularly over the past couple of years, who have been really good inspiration, really good help if I am having struggles with particular projects, or if I'm uncertain about how to do things. And just a really good general resource just to bounce off ideas, or what do you think of this? Or if you were to design a layout, what would it be? Or these sorts of conversations. And I've found that even those hypotheticals have led to a lot of inspiration.
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? Yeah, it's the people around you that sometimes can share those ideas and sort of help you out with sometimes the problems that you get stuck with, that you just don't think of the answer. And someone goes, well, I've had this problem and you actually need to do this.
Even if people have different skills, like I was having trouble with the DCC install the other day. Just a mate of mine who's much better with soldering and such than I am. He was like, yeah, no problem, I'll sort it. He took the loco home with him and sorted it all and gave it back to me a few days later. Just to have friendship with people like that can assist when things even at times get too difficult for one person alone.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I think I'll be in the same boat as you. I'd have to find someone that could understand DCC to sort of problem out for me, because that's sort of a minefield of sort of knowledge for me. I don't know where to start, to be honest. It's well, I don't know. I like DCC, but I'm very much I learned how to work with analog and how to do isolation switches and all that, and sometimes I feel better in my comfort zone of sticking to that. But I'm determined that I will go fully DCC on the layout eventually. It's just steady progress to get there. That's it for our interview, Mitch. And I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. You've been absolutely fountain of knowledge on Australian railways. I've learned so much in our conversation. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit nervous having this conversation with you because I was like, he's going to talk about things and I ain't going to have a clue what he's talking about. But you've been so informative. It's been absolute pleasure, and I'm absolutely guaranteed that the people listening will have no problem Googling and finding out all the things that you've described and having a look at them for themselves, even from your description. It's just been absolutely brilliant to learn about the Australian railways, the different
thank you.
gauges, and the fact that everyone should be modelling in the narrow gauge of Queensland. So, been a pleasure to talk to you.
100%. And thank you for your kind words. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate that.
No problem. So, what we'd like to do, obviously, before we go, is just give you the opportunity to shout yourself out. So, if people want to find you online, where can they find you?
So I have a Facebook page, and I'm also on Instagram, and I'm Mitch's models on both of them.
Excellent stuff. So, Mitch's Models on Facebook and Instagram. So, yeah, people, when you have the opportunity, go there and find Mitch. Mitch, thank you very much. We're going to take a short break now, and we'll be back for our usual social media shout outs.
This world we live in is a wondrous and fascinating place. We stand on the brink of greatness and a chance to make a real difference in this world. Two people who are not making a difference in the world are James and Sam. So great are their egos that you can now support them on Patreon from $5 per month to just show your support. You too can watch the model railway world burn under their narcissistic natures. Head on over patreon.com/Model Rail Replacement Podcast.
And we are back, and that was our interview with Mitch from Mitch's Models. So, yeah, thank you very much, Mitch, for coming on the show. It's been an absolute delight talking to him, and I learned so much in that conversation. Australian, where railways, the weathering tips, everything. Yeah, brilliant to talk to him.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about the Australian modeling is it does have, and I mentioned this a few times during the interview, it does have that essence where it has the American or the Canadian meets British railway to it. I think it definitely has more of the American side of it, but you can see that British heritage side of it, or you can see like little influences. And I think one of their like high-speed passenger trains is actually a HST. If you go and look into it, Mitch, you'll have to get in contact with me because you'll know exactly which one I'm talking about. But they have a train that is either almost exactly the same as, or very similar, or is in fact a HST that runs in Australia. So
yeah, they do, because I think Hornby may have model of it, and I remember seeing Francis Bourgeois, the luckiest train spotter in the world, who got to go to Australia, and I think he got to at least have a look in the cab before watching it pull out the station. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's definitely cool to know there's a strong version of it out there.
I think hopefully this will have inspired you to look into Australian modelling. I know it's not necessarily something that is easy for us to model, but you can definitely have a look at some of the stuff, and it, regardless of whether it's and it's the same when James and I talk about the American modelers when we do our shout outs. It does have this beauty to it that doesn't have to be something that you model, but it's something that you can take inspiration from. James's shout out last week, we were talking about this before we started recording. What I like about it is I like looking at the American ones and having a look at how their yards and their ladders and stuff like that are done on their layouts, and it does give me a bit of inspiration to sort of go, well, theirs always seems to feel like they've made better use of the space, and I definitely get that feeling from it. So yeah, hopefully you'll have a look into Australian modelling with this. Mitch is Mitch's Models on Instagram as well, and definitely worth a follow if you're listening to this.
Yeah, definitely indeed. Cool. So we'll move on to our social media shout outs. I went first last week, so Sam, you can go first this week.
Excellent. So I've got one. We talked about this person, this channel a couple of times, but it's the first time that I'm giving it a proper shout out. So this one is going out to friend and fantastic weathering and now terrain creator, Bunter's Yard. If you haven't heard of Bunter's Yard, Dave started out doing a lot of weathering tutorials, and I think that Dave's weathering tutorials at Bunter's Yard are definitely more on the grimy side, hence why I really love it. And he tends to push a lot of the weathering a lot further than some other people do. Whether or not you believe it's realistic, I know that's something that he does tend to get comments on, and I think that's rubbish. I think it looks great, and there, like I've said previously, you can get so many things weathered like this, but Dave does some fantastic weathering tutorials. I binge watched a lot of his weathering videos when I was sat up in hospital in 2021. I remember sitting there and I basically had my laptop in front of me and I just binge watched, and ironically won his competition he did back then as well, but that's a different story. Just binge watched loads of his weathering tutorials, and I pick up like little bits and bobs. And I think one of the best things that he's ever said about is using white oil paints to weather with, because it effectively, whatever color you put it on, you can effectively make it look like a faded version of that color. It's such a little interesting thing. So yeah, if you want to learn some amazing tips and tricks. But Dave does also now, he 3D prints a lot of stuff, but he's also really into making MDF terrain. He made the bridge that's going to appear on my new layout, but he's also really big into doing platforms and stuff like that. And I think this may be absolute rubbish, so Dave or Neil, if you're listening, I'm pretty sure that Dave is building a lot of terrain for Neil at Little Layouts. See, a nice little link in there for you. So that's my shout out, James. What have you got for us this week?
I like Bunter's Yard, I've got to say. I do enjoy it. And why you say, like, people say, oh, the weathering isn't realistic. I mean, what people need to remember is weathering is an art form, and how someone does it and how they apply it and how they have it is their signature and their style. So it might not be up for you, it is for them. So something to bear in mind, I think, for people there. But we could get into a new subject over, carry on with this one. Anyway, mine is BA14 Eagle. I'm not gonna lie, this is someone I worked with previously in my railway career, but I do enjoy his channel, and he does a lot of videos of various shows that he goes to. His garden layout, which is a mix of O gauge and OO gauge, running side by side, which I don't think there's many out there. Although talking to him the other day, he was very tempted to have the NG7 on the OO track to run by the O gauge in the garden, which I thought sounded quite cool. But yeah, it's a BA14 Eagle. There's some absolutely great videos on there in regards to the shows. He gets to a lot of shows, so always quite enjoyable to watch. And as I say, yeah, it's got a wonderful little garden layout and sort of running sessions on there too. So that's my shout out of the week.
Excellent. I do follow the channel. Very, very nice. And it is one of those channels that do create really good exhibition videos to watch as well. So completely agree on that one.
Cool. Well, that pretty much brings us to the end of the show. It's just our usual own social media shout out. So Sam, if people want to find you, how do they find you?
If you want to find me, you can get me on Instagram at emperors_path, or you can find me on YouTube at Emperors Path. James, how can we get hold of you?
Yeah, if you want to find me, it's Western Signalman on YouTube or Instagram, westernsignalman at outlook.com. But don't forget that the Model Rail Replacement Podcast also has a Instagram account. You can find us there on Model Rail Replacement Podcast, and you can email us at modelrailrp@outlook.com. So that's RP Romeo Papa. That pretty much sums us up for this show. So I'll say the usual, that hopefully we have been entertaining, informative, and have replaced your model railway, if only just for a little bit. I've been James, and with me has been Sam. Good night.
This service terminates here. Please ensure you take all of your personal belongings with you.